Howdy, and welcome to INST301, Module 38, Planning for Effective Teaching. In this module, we will be identifying some characteristics of effective and expert teachers, as well as go over the dimensional model of a classroom climate. Additionally, we will be diving into the major points and common practices having to do with teacher planning. This will lead us into the development and instructional objectives and how these intended learning outcomes fractured education into two camps, behavioral and cognitive. In the last third of this module, we will witness the division of Bloom's taxonomy of learning domains as they apply to teaching plans, as well as become up to date with the 2001 revisions of Bloom's taxonomy of the cognitive domain. Lastly, we will briefly cover the constructivist planning that has become so common in recent years, as well as explore some examples that could possibly be applied. Researching effective teaching by sheer fact of subject matter is inherently difficult. One could interview educators and administrators of varying degrees of experience, or even conduct extensive classroom observations of constantly successful teachers in order to distill effective strategies and practices. Using a method known as stimulated recall, some researchers even go as far as to video record a teacher's lecture and have them go back and review the tapes in order to give essentially a play-by-play of their process and actions. No matter the specific research study, early findings revealed some similar overarching qualities in successful educators. These characteristics were clarity, warmth, and most recently, knowledge. Over 50 studies of teaching from 1973 to 2012 concluded that clarity was one of the most promising indicators for determining effective teaching. Teachers who provided clear explanation during instruction were most likely to have the most successful students. A lot of those same studies found that levels of teacher enthusiasm were positively correlated with gains in student achievement. While enthusiasm is not a proven cause, it is not hard to see when someone is truly enthusiastic about a particular subject or topic area. As a student, when your interest is captured and held by an enthusiastic educator, does it not seem like you're operating on a whole nother level? While warmth, friendliness, and understanding are also correlated with student success, these traits are often taken less seriously as causing success due to the common situation of a nice teacher being walked all over on by their students. Using this example, I hope you can see that warmth is about personal perceptions, about liking a teacher and liking a class, and not about objective improvements in performance. As I said earlier, knowledge was found to be a major quality in successful educators. Knowledge and insight in any field or context are age-old indicators of expertise. The most effective teachers are expert teachers. Expert teachers are experienced and reflective educators who, over the years, have developed their own solutions for problems that plague first-year teacher classrooms. They also have an extensive knowledge of their course content and the teaching process. To an expert teacher, students' behavior problems and/or wrong answers to test questions are not purely the surface-level defiance or failure of grasping class content they appear to be. They are calls for help, feedback, or even a roadmap to their cognitive process and understanding. It is up to that teacher to read into what the students are truly responding with. As a master teacher, you need to have a special level and combination of knowledge that combines a complete mastery of certified academic content with the confidence in methods and strategies to teach said content. You would also need to know how to creatively finesse instruction to match certain student difficulties and differences. This blend of mastery, confidence, and adaptive creativity is known as pedagogical content knowledge. In addition, expert teachers must be thoughtful and inventive. This is exemplified by educators who constantly try to improve their impact on students by thinking back over situations and analyzing their actions. They then consider the other possible courses of action they could have taken and if that would have saved time or improved the learning and comprehension of their students. This leads to improvement in instruction through reflection, or in other words, reflective improvement. While we've gone over it in general terms, what specifically do expert teachers learn throughout their years of experience, and what makes them so successful? In the late 1980s, Lee Shulman expanded on this thought. He identified 7 specific areas of professional knowledge that are keys to expert teacher success. As you've heard before, these expert teachers know the subjects that they teach like the back of their hand. Their knowledge is deep and interconnected. This is the real-life expression of the I eat, sleep, and breathe, football, music, insert your own blank here, mantra that we commonly hear. They have also studied up on and applied their own general teaching strategies, things such as classroom management and course layout. With experience, teachers also come to know and be familiar with supplemental curriculum materials and programs that are either well suited and specifically designed for their content or for their student levels. They also develop special ways of teaching particularly difficult concepts in their subject by engaging students with fun science experiments, historical reenactments, or even just really relatable hypothetical situations or anecdotes. They can further improve to drive home their lessons by knowing and relating with the cultural characteristics and backgrounds of their students. Understanding how the use of different learning settings, pairs, small groups, teams, etc. can affect success is key in properly delivering instruction. Finally, expert teachers internalize teaching. Much like velociraptors, students can sense when a teacher is not serious about the success of their kids. Beyond the individual educator lies the classroom climate. Research by Robert Pianta and colleagues developed a three-dimensional climate model. These dimensions: affective, cognitive, and behavioral. The affective dimension of Pianta's model is defined by teacher emotional support. These are mainly characteristics that are harder to pinpoint, such as warmth, sensitivity, and respect. The cognitive dimension of the model contains instructional support, which includes components such as higher-level concept development and the quality of discussion between students and teachers. This instantly becomes easier when expert teachers who have a wealth of knowledge and experience enter the equation. The final dimension of Pianta's classroom climate model is all about classroom organization. This is more about structure and policy rather than emotion or analysis. Time allocation, formatting, and behavior response are all geared toward improving the learning climate in each teacher's classroom. Once the class is set up, all eyes are on what the teacher has up their sleeve. In the past few years, education research has become interested in one of the most varying aspects of education: teacher planning. Depending on quality, planning can severely help or hurt classroom outcomes. These plans are the most influential aspects of what a student learns, how they learn it, and if they even remember it. A primary variable in planning is time allocation. If an elementary school teacher spent only a few minutes developing math concepts a week, what chance would the students from that particular class have when it came to passing a state standardized test? Establishing allocations early and sticking to them would be the best way to appear structured. Teachers engage in many levels of planning. These include day, week, unit, term, as well as others. All of these levels of planning must be meshed and coordinated, especially with state and district curriculums. If no particular week or unit plan adds to the success of the yearly plan, then the yearly plan falls apart. Don't take this, however, as saying there can be no uniqueness or flexibility. In fact, it's the opposite. There is such a thing as over-planning, so much so that after one instance of falling behind, the entire school year unravels. While teachers can go the Rambo route of doing it themselves, sharing and expanding on ideas leads to much better results. Lesson study, originally known as Kenshu, or mastery through study, is a method of distilling potentially effective lessons through cycles of implementation, review, and adaptation. This group method of testing, improving, and retesting specific lesson plans is surprisingly effective, spawning several educational websites offering great lesson plans that are at a Walter White level of quality. While you could try to apply a third-party lesson plan to your class, every class is different, and being in it with them is the only way to gauge the adaptations needed. In education rhetoric, we always hear about goals, standards, and indicators, but at this level, they have very little meaning. It is when you get down to instructional objectives that things become a little more concrete. Instructional objectives are clear statements of what students are intended to learn through instructions, or sometimes the specific performances expected to demonstrate that they actually got the intended learning outcome. When developing instructional objectives, there are two schools of thought, behavioral and cognitive, usually associated with lower-level terms such as list, define, add, or calculate. Behavioralists want to focus on learning changes that are both observable and measurable. During the 1970s, Robert Meagher developed a standard system for writing behavioral instructional objectives. First, it would describe the intended student behavior, then the condition in which the intended behavior occurs. Finally, it gives some sort of criteria for an acceptable performance. A good example would be, given a recent article from an online political blog, the student will mark each statement with an F for fact or an O for opinion, with 75% of the statements correctly marked. See, you have all 3 points. You have research or a recent article from a blog, that's the condition. Then you have marking fact and opinion, student behavior. And if they get 75% of the facts and opinions correct, that's the criteria for an acceptable performance. The cognitive camp, instead of wanting observable behavior, strives to emphasize thinking and comprehension, and are usually associated with higher-level thinking operations, such as to understand, recognize, create, and apply. Led by Gronlund and Rockhart, an approach was developed for cognitive instructional objectives. First, an objective would be stated in general terms, such as to understand, solve, appreciate, or apply. A teacher would then list some sample behaviors of what they were looking for. They would, of course, never be able to list all the behaviors of comprehension, but with the 2 parts as a whole, the objective would be pretty clear. The following table is from the book, indicating cognitive instructional objectives. We now arrive to the application of teaching plans, featuring Bloom's taxonomy and constructivism. Also, Farrell, because he's in everything. Or should I have picked Pitbull? About 60 years ago, Benjamin Bloom and Company created a taxonomy of educational objectives that would be used up until this day. A taxonomy in general is a classification system for educational objectives. These objectives were divided into 3 domains, the cognitive, the affective, and the psychomotor. While for academic purposes, we are splitting these domains up, remember, learning in students activates all of these domains at the same time. Bloom's taxonomy of the thinking, aka the cognitive domain, specializes in memory and reasoning objectives. It is a staple of education literature. The original 1956 version contained 6 basic principles: knowledge, comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. It wasn't until 2001 that the objectives were revised to better apply to learning. The objectives became the processes remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. These processes must be applied to something, so another axis was added to the mix. This was the learner's interaction with knowledge. This knowledge comes in 4 types: factual, conceptual, procedural, and metacognitive. Using this revised taxonomy, new and better objectives could be crafted. An example of an objective that can be derived from this chart would be, after reading an historical account of the Battle of the Alamo, patients will be able to explain the author's point of view. You see, analyze is number 4. You go down to conceptual knowledge, where conceptual knowledge and analyze meet. You have the verb explain. Still going strong from its original incarnation is the taxonomy of the affective domain. This contains objectives that are based in attitude and feeling. These objectives build on each other, running from the least to the most committed. Receiving would be being aware of a stimulus. Responding would be showing a new behavior as a result of the stimulus. Valuing would now show a solid response. Organization would actually be an integration into one's priorities. Finally, characterization would mean a constant action and internalization of the original stimulus. For me, this reads like a clinical view of my intense fandom for such properties as Doctor Who and Star Wars. The third domain, psychomotor, is based on physical ability and coordination objectives. This domain is commonly overlooked by academics, although a wide range of fields could benefit from psychomotor objectives. Fine arts, vocational programs, and chemistry, just to name a few. Objectives in this domain range from physical perceptions and reflex reactions to highly specific and technical movements. They are defined as voluntary muscle capabilities and the ability to perform a specific skill or action. Two very different objectives could be 4 minutes after completing a mile run, a heart rate would be 120 or below, or using a computer mouse to effectively drag and drop files. These are both in the realm of the psychomotor domain. Lastly, we'll take a quick look at constructivism in teacher planning. In general, the constructivist approach is a view of education that emphasizes the active role of a learner, in which they do their part to build understanding as well as making sense of the presented information. In this approach, planning is no longer the sole responsibility of the teacher. Planning is shared. Rather than target specific student behaviors, like most of the methods we covered before, teachers present themselves with big themes and overarching goals to guide planning. The teachers and students together make decisions about content, activities, and approaches. Rather than dividing class time to one subject at a time, integrated planning can take a theme or a topic and explore it through a combination of subjects and skills. These subjects and skills can allow for more well-rounded and effective learning. Some possible themes are presented in the table below, but this is by no means the only topics that can work. This concludes Module 38. I hope you walked away with learning a little bit more about planning and effective teaching. This module, as well as Module 1 posted earlier in the week, will be included in the final exam on December 15th from 3:30 to 5:30. If you will only be doing your semester project, your final exam is optional. Good luck, happy holidays, and it's been a pleasure working with y'all this semester. Thank you.